Chapter 1. The Waiting Room. The clock was 7:46 a.m. when Isadora entered the Santa Alianza hospital. The sky was still gray, and the city slept under a fine fog that covered the cars parked on the street. He carried with him only a small backpack, an image exam folded in his hand, and the tired expression of someone who had lived with an invisible pain for too long. It wasn't the first time I'd stepped there, but something about that day felt different. The hospital smelled the same as always: disinfectant, reheated coffee, and that subtle touch of anguish that hovers where life and death meet. Isadora squeezed the envelope tightly. Not that it was going to help her, but it was an automatic, almost ritualistic gesture. The triage sector was crowded, people coughing, children crying, elderly people with lost eyes. She waited in line for 27 minutes, listening to each number called as if it were a countdown to something even she couldn't define. Password 203, the metallic voice announced. Isadora stood up. She was led to a small room where a young nurse, with a voice too gentle for that environment, asked the usual questions. Full name? Isadora Ramos Ferraz. Why the appointment? Recurrent abdominal pain, tiredness, intestinal changes. I have this report. She held out the envelope. The nurse picked him up carefully, almost as if she didn't want to let go of the weight of the diagnosis he might contain. He typed something into the system, read it, wrote down codes. He handed a blue bracelet to Isadora. Room 3, the doctor will already see you. Isadora thanked her with a short wave. On the way to the indicated room, he looked around and tried to distract himself with details. The painting on the walls, the picture of the campaign against diabetes, the television without sound broadcasting news that no one watched. But everything was blurry. The world seemed to spin slowly inside, as if time was conditioned by the emotional state of the waiter. She sat down. He looked to the sides. No one seemed more lost than her. Then, the door to room 3 opened. Isadora Ferraz? She got up in a hurry, tripping over the foot of a chair. Can you come in, please? The doctor was young. He must not have been more than 30 years old. Beard made, lab coat too clean for the environment, an almost forced smile. Good morning, Isadora. I am Dr. Alvaro. You can sit down. She obeyed. Have you had tests before? Yes, ultrasound, endoscopy, and tomography. Everything here in this envelope. He took the papers, analyzed them in silence. The silence that lasts seconds, but that echoes in the patient's head like hours. I see. Their scans show inflammation in the colon, but there's also a mass here that needs investigation. Did you ever have a biopsy? Not yet. The previous doctor asked for it, but I was referred here before. Dr. Alvaro typed frantically. He looked at her with attentive eyes. Let's do the following. I'll admit you today for biopsy collection, and, if that's what I'm thinking, we may need to act fast, okay? Isadora hesitated. Act fast how? I don't want to alarm you, but we need to eliminate any possibility of malignancy, and at this stage time is a determining factor. She nodded, almost voiceless. Do you have any relatives with you? I'm alone. He paused briefly. All right, I'm going to call the hospitalization sector. Can you wait outside for a few minutes? Isadora left the room with a lump in her throat. He sat down again, but the chair seemed harder now. He took out his cell phone. No message, no notification. The world continued outside, indifferent to what was about to happen to her. In a collective room, Isadora received a thin nightgown, a new bracelet, now red, and a surgical consent. The procedure would be the next day. The name of the procedure? Exploratory partial colectomy. She read it 3 times but had no idea what it meant. In the next bed, a 70-year-old lady named D. Estella slept with her mouth open. The television was showing an auditorium program. No one seemed to notice that on the other side of the curtain, Isadora was trembling. She took out her cell phone and called someone she hadn't spoken to in months, her mother. He called 3 times, mailbox. Hi, Mom, it's Isa. I'm going to have surgery tomorrow. I wanted to warn you. I don't know if it's serious, but I'm scared. That's it. Kiss. Hung up. He put his cell phone away. He looked at the ceiling. He closed his eyes. Night before surgery, Dr. Larissa, a resident, entered the room with a clipboard. Hi, Isadora. Everything okay here? She tried to smile. Sort of, I see. Staying in the hospital is never easy, but everything will be fine. Dr. Alvaro is very good. What exactly is this surgery? Larissa read the paper. It is a partial removal of the colon where the lesion is. We will collect tissue, send it for analysis. It could be just inflammation, it could be something more serious. But acting now is the best chance to solve it. Isadora swallowed. What if it's cancer? Larissa hesitated. If it is, it will be at the beginning. That's it. It greatly increases the chances of cure. Have you ever seen someone die because of a mistake in here? The question came dry. Larissa widened her eyes, took a breath. I've seen it, and I've seen people live because a mistake led to a success. Isadora didn't understand. What do you mean? Sometimes we make a mistake and discover something we didn't even know existed. The doctor smiled, patted her lightly on the shoulder, and left. Isadora got the phrase hammering in her head. I've seen people live because of a mistake. The sound of the heart monitor marked a steady beat. Beep, beep, beep. Isadora woke up slowly, her eyes heavy, her body strange, as if it was no longer hers. The white ceiling and cold lights of the recovery center merged into a shapeless blur. For a second, she didn't know where she was. Then, he remembered. The surgery. A doctor in a blue cap appeared in his field of vision. Isadora, do you hear me? She nodded slowly. The surgery went well. We removed the injury and you are under observation. You'll be a little dizzy. It's normal. Soon we will take her back to the bedroom. She wanted to ask what they had taken. How much? Why? But the words did not come out. Beep, beep, beep. Closed curtain. Noises of stretcher wheels. Muffled voices. That environment smelled of ether and silence. 4 hours later. Back in the room, Isadora felt torn to pieces. The nurse adjusted the serum, checked vital signs, and wrote something down in the digital medical record next to the bed. You're going to feel a little crampy, Isa. His intestines were scrambled. But everything is under control. She tried to answer, but the pain wouldn't let her. It was an internal, deep pain, as if a part of it had been torn away, and not just physically. Later, with a little more strength, he called the nurse again. I'm sorry, can I see the surgery report? Do you want the surgical report? Yes. Alone, just to understand what they took exactly. Of course, but only the doctor can release that. Dr. Alvaro is coming tomorrow to visit. We ask him, okay? Isadora nodded, but felt something strange. A restlessness that grew in my chest. She didn't know what they had taken, and no one seemed to want to say. At dawn, Isadora couldn't sleep. The night nurse was new. She seemed inexperienced. He left the medical records tablet unlocked on the small table next to the bed while he looked for a sheet in the closet. Isadora stretched out her hand. The medical record was open in the surgery tab. He read quickly. Procedure, sigmoidectomy plus prophylactic radical hysterectomy. Hysterectomy? She froze. He read it again. The removal of the uterus. But that was not part of the surgery. No one mentioned it. No one asked for authorization. He broke out in a cold sweat. He closed the tablet before the nurse returned. He lay down. The world turned. She pressed the call button. No one came. He took out his cell phone. No network. The hospital was a bunker. That wing didn't get a signal. She was alone, afraid. And with something removed from your body without consent. Dr. Alvaro entered with 2 resident doctors. Smile on his face. Cold eyes. Good morning, Isadora. How are you feeling? Weak. But well, great. Vital signs are great too. We'll keep you 1 more day just in case. Doctor, can I ask you something? Of course. I saw the medical record. Was a hysterectomy done? He hesitated for a microsecond. Yes, we did it because we noticed important changes in the uterus during abdominal exploration. We think it is safer to withdraw to avoid future complications. But I didn't authorize that, Isa. In this type of procedure, when the surgeon is faced with a serious abnormality, he has the autonomy to act for the benefit of the patient. That's what I did. And honestly, it saved his life. She was silent. The complete report comes out in 7 days, but everything indicates that it was a correct decision. Her uterus showed clear signs of necrosis and possible neoplasia. If we didn't take it out there, you could have a fatal infection. The word echoed, neoplasia, cancer. But still, Isadora felt that something was wrong. Not with what was said, but with the way it was said, the tone, the coldness, the rush to justify, the use of technical terms to cover up a lack of true explanation. At home, Isadora spent hours trying to access her exams through the hospital system. Forgotten password, unstable site, dropped calls, no one helped. Until a friend, a nurse, suggested, "You can go straight to the medical records sector. Ask for a physical copy of the surgical report. By law, they are required to provide." And that's what she did. Isadora sat in a hard chair in the medical records sector. He received a brown envelope, opened. He read every line and then froze. Patient's name, Maria Luisa Ferreira da Costa. Registration, 101283. Bed, 217-B. Process, sigmoidectomy plus radical hysterectomy. It wasn't her name. It was another patient, another registration number, another bed. But the same procedure they had done on her. And more. Maria Luisa was hospitalized on the same day, on the same floor, in the She understood everything. The surgery done on her, it was the other woman's. She was operated on in place of someone else. Isadora held the envelope with trembling hands. The yellowed paper, worn by time and handling, seemed to weigh more than his own tired body. The finding was clear. That was not his medical record. But what was worse, the surgery she had undergone was not for her. At that moment, a mixture of anger, fear, and confusion invaded his mind. How was it possible that in a renowned hospital with strict protocols, an identity change could happen? She knew she needed to seek answers, not only to understand what really happened, but to make sure that no other woman went through that. The next day, Isadora returned to the hospital, determined to talk to the surgeon in charge. He asked to speak with Dr. Alvaro. After insistence and some bureaucratic turns, he managed to get a brief audience in the hospital corridor. He was surrounded by a team of residents, speaking with the calm and authority of those in control of the situation. When Isadora appeared, he looked at her for a moment, as if observing an uncomfortable shadow in his path. "Dr. Isadora, right?" he said with a cold smile, trying to disguise his discomfort. "Actually, I'm patient Isadora Ramos Ferraz," she replied firmly. "You have to understand what happened to me." Alvaro frowned but kept his composure. "I did what was necessary. An identification error can happen, but the most important thing was the quick decision to save lives." "You know I was operated on by mistake, don't you?" Isadora asked in a firm voice. "I didn't have any cancer diagnosed, and even so, I had my uterus removed." He paused, as if pondering whether to deny or explain. Then he turned his gaze to one of the residents and muttered something. "Let me talk to the administration, ma'am. Let's clarify everything." What Isadora did not know is that, at that very moment, inside a silent room of the hospital, a complex network of decisions was already being plotted to hide the incident. The Santa Alianza Hospital had a reputation to uphold, millionaire contracts with health plans, and a clientele that blindly trusted its professionals. But not everything was perfect. In a dimly lit office, the managing director was talking to the head of the legal sector. "We need to contain this leak," she said. "The patient is restless, and this can snowball." The lawyer sighed, leafing through documents. "We have to act fast. The media is already circulating rumors. If this explodes, it could jeopardize our licenses and credibility. Do whatever it takes," she replied relentlessly. Meanwhile, Isadora began to investigate on her own. He talked to nurses, former patients, and went to the regional medical council to consult the doctor's history. What she discovered surprised her. Dr. Alvaro had a clean past, no formal complaints registered. An impeccable career awarded at congresses, known for his firm hand and quick decisions in complex surgeries. But no one talked about his way of dealing with mistakes or complications. Isadora felt that he was a key player and a figure who, behind his controlled smile, hid deep secrets. On a rainy afternoon, while waiting for the result of some documents, Isadora received an anonymous message, an invitation to meet in a discreet cafe on the outskirts of the city. Not knowing if she should accept, curiosity won out. When she got there, she sat down at the table where a middle-aged man was waiting for her. "You're Isadora, right?" "Yes, I worked at the hospital. I know your case, and more. They want to hide the truth." He handed her a USB stick. "There's everything there. documents, audios, internal messages. But be careful, their system is strong. Isadora returned home with her heart racing and the feeling that she had opened a Pandora's box. When she plugged the USB stick into the computer, Isadora found internal reports, records of attendance, emails exchanged between the board and the medical team. One of them drew attention. We need to act quickly so that the incident of the patient with the changed medical record does not leak to the press. Dr. Alvaro confirmed that the surgery was necessary, and even with the error, the decision was correct. Another, more unsettling email was from the IT sector. I request that the retroactive change of electronic records be made to avoid legal problems. Isadora felt a lump in her throat. It was not just a mistake, it was a collusion to cover up a serious failure. Among the files there was also a handwritten letter, signed by a nurse who identified herself as Anna. In the text, she reported, "Working here is a challenge. We have seen cases that should never happen, patients who have suffered from hasty decisions or lack of communication. I'm afraid of losing my job, but I can't stay silent. What they did to Mrs. Isadora was not an accident. It's part of a culture of neglect." Isadora knew that now she was facing something bigger than she imagined. Even with fear, even in the face of silent threats, Isadora made a decision. She would take all the evidence to the press. It would be an uphill battle. The system seemed armored. But if she didn't fight, other women would continue to be victims. And she didn't want to be just a victim anymore. I wanted to be the voice of those who had no voice. Isadora felt the pain as a constant, silent shadow that accompanied her in every movement. The wound on his abdomen wasn't just physical, it was a visceral symbol of the mistake that had changed his life. Every step, every deep breath, reminded her of what was taken without consent. Her womb, her right, her history. Soon after being discharged from the hospital, the cold reality awaited her at home. The silence was heavy, overwhelming. His bed seemed too big for a body that carried so many scars, external and internal. The nights were the worst. The pain became more intense, as if he wanted to expel all hope from her. She tossed and turned in bed through silent tears, trying to grasp a shred of normalcy that escaped. In addition to the physical, the emotional abyss has opened. Isadora, who had always been independent and strong, now felt fragile and lost. The questions echoed in his mind with no clear answers. Why didn't anyone warn her before the hysterectomy? Who took responsibility for that mistake? Why hadn't his voice been heard inside the hospital? His thoughts were a whirlwind. She felt betrayed, manipulated by a system that promised to care and that, in the end, disregarded her as a human being. It was on one of those difficult nights that she received an unexpected message. An unknown number, a simple phrase, "You're not alone." It was from Anna, the nurse who had sent the revealing letter. In the weeks that followed, Anna became a constant, if distant, presence. Messages, quick calls, crucial information. "I know what you're going through, Isadora," Anna said, "and I know the hospital won't make it easy. But together, we can expose the truth." This connection brought a thread of hope, a faint light that encouraged her not to give up. Meanwhile, Isadora went through a series of medical appointments to deal with her physical recovery. A gynecologist recommended psychological counseling to deal with the trauma of loss and emotional shock. During one of these consultations, a new bombshell was dropped. "Isadora, your tests indicate something worrisome," the doctor said with a serious look. "There are initial signs of a lesion in the large intestine. It's something we need to investigate immediately." It was as if the pain and fear had gained a new reason to stay, another ghost to haunt his recovery. At the same time, Isadora began to try to talk to the hospital administration. It was ignored, avoided, set aside. Always a new excuse, a protocol to follow, a department that was not the right one. In formal meetings, hospital representatives insisted on downplaying what happened, calling it an isolated incident. But Isadora knew it wasn't. The nurse's letter, the documents she had received, all indicated that she was part of a systemic problem. It was then that Isadora found support on the internet. Groups of victims of medical errors, discussion forums, pages dedicated to denouncing hospital negligence. She began sharing her story anonymously, hearing similar accounts that broadened her understanding of the collective tragedy. More than anything, she realized that her struggle was bigger than her. It was the struggle of many silenced women. Determined to go all the way, Isadora began to organize her tests. Documents, messages, testimonials. He contacted lawyers, activists, and journalists. He knew that the road would be long and arduous, that there would be threats, fears, and perhaps losses. But in his heart, a flame burned. She would not let error define her story. She would write the next chapter. After endless days, Isadora understood that the key to unraveling the mystery was in the documents. Medical records, reports, everything that could show the flaws and cover up the truth. But the hospital did not cooperate. On the contrary, it seemed that the more she searched, the more doors closed. Isadora went to the hospital's physical archive sector, an old place full of rusty bookshelves and dusty folders. He asked for access to the original medical record of patient Maria Luisa Ferreira da Costa, the owner of the medical record she had received by mistake. The attendant, a frowning man named Sergio, made a gesture of impatience. "Madam, this record is not here. It has probably been scanned or transferred. It needs to go the IT sector." But in the IT sector, the bureaucracy was even worse. Missing documents, corrupted files, deleted logs. Isadora felt a chill. In the digital world of the hospital, information was like sand running down your fingers. Isadora spent hours with Nurse Anna's USB stick, trying to put the pieces together. But whenever I found a file compromised, a clean version or a copy without the important parts appeared. There was clearly an attempt to erase traces. Desperate, Isadora made contact with an old college friend, Lucas, who worked as a digital security specialist. Lucas agreed to help. Unofficially, of course. It was a risk, but he knew the hospital was hiding something. After days of intense work, Lucas was able to recover old versions of the documents, deleted files, and deleted emails. Among the recovered files, Isadora read medical reports with hidden diagnoses, reports changed with modified dates and names, internal messages in which the exchange of medical records was treated as an emergency protocol, despite clearly being a failure. Documents that indicated that the hospital had an acceptable rate of surgical errors, as if it were a statistical variable, not a human tragedy. The feeling that dominated Isadora was that she was not dealing with an isolated accident, but with a corrupt and cruel gear. An email arrived in his inbox with the headline, "They're watching you." Isadora trembled. In the body of the message, there was only one file attached, a video recorded by a hospital security camera. In it, a group of employees spoke in low voices about who knew too much and who could be the next victim. Isadora realized that her investigation was messing with powerful interests. That same night, when Isadora was locking the door of her apartment, she found a note taped together. "Stop now or prepare for the consequences." It was clear and direct. But instead of frightening her, the message only made her resolve grow. As the days passed, Isadora began to realize that she was not alone. On social networks, similar complaints emerged, stories of patients who had wrong procedures and were silenced. It became a point of reference for anonymous victims seeking a voice, but also a target. Decided, Isadora gathered a small group, Anna, Lucas, and a lawyer specializing in patient rights. They planned the exposure of the hospital corruption network. They knew the battle would be tough, but the truth had to come out. Isadora knew that in order to dismantle the network of corruption at Santa Alianza Hospital, she needed to listen to those who were inside, the employees who, despite their fear, carried unspoken truths and suffocated secrets. Anna, the anonymous nurse who had sent her the USB stick, began to discreetly introduce her to colleagues who also wanted to talk. All hidden, afraid, but desirous that someone would hear their stories. Isadora began to receive testimonies, recorded messages, even furtive encounters in cafes and parks. One of the first voices to emerge was that of João, a nursing technician with 15 years in the hospital, who confessed, "We know what happens here. Errors are covered up, documents are falsified. I saw people suffer, patients who were victims of negligence who never left the corridors." João spoke about the constant pressure, the fear of reprisals, and the silent despair. Another voice was that of Dr. Camila, a resident doctor who was tired of the hypocrisy. We learn to save lives, but we see managers throw everything under the rug when money speaks louder. She spoke about the lack of support to report, the veiled threats, and the loneliness of those who want to do the right thing. An older nurse, Sergio, shared a tearful account. I missed a change of medicines once. The patient almost died. It haunts me to this day. In the hospital, no one wants to take responsibility, but we suffer in the soul. Isadora realized that behind the masks of professionals, there were people broken by the system. With the growing support, Isadora decided to organize a secret meeting between the employees willing to denounce. It was a tense moment of sharing and courage. Each story reinforced the picture of systemic neglect. From this meeting, internal evidence began to emerge. Documents, photos, recordings. Isadora felt that the battle was finally starting to gain momentum. Isadora knew that the next step would require more than courage. It would require strategy and legal support. With the material she gathered, she was ready to formalize the complaint, but also aware that the war was just beginning. On a cloudy day, Isadora and her lawyer entered the building of the Regional Council of Medicine. The place was imposing, full of marble walls and silent corridors. Sitting in the waiting room, her heart was beating fast. I knew that there was a decisive step. When she was called, she handed over the complete dossier, documents, emails, recorded testimonies, and the USB stick with evidence. The counselors listened attentively. Some were surprised, others skeptical. "We have a serious case here," said a counselor, adjusting her glasses. "Exchange of medical records, surgeries without consent, concealment of documents." Isadora felt that they understood the gravity, but she knew that many interests were at stake. The council has opened a preliminary investigation. The hospital was notified and had a deadline to present its defense. Isadora prepared herself for a battle of arguments, trying to ensure that the truth would not be swallowed up by the bureaucratic gears. Soon after the complaint, Isadora noticed changes in her routine. Anonymous calls, attempts to hack into his social networks. The environment around him became tense. They want me to stop, he thought, but she did not give in. As the council investigated, the story was leaked to the press. Reporters sought out Isadora, eager to tell her story of courage. Public pressure helped protect Isadora, while increasing the hospital's exposure. Months later, in a courtroom, Isadora and hospital representatives met face to face. The atmosphere was tense. The hospital maintained its version, trying to minimize the facts. But the evidence was overwhelming. More than a legal issue, the case became a moral judgment on the responsibility of health professionals and respect for human life. Isadora spoke with a firm voice, representing not only herself but thousands of silenced patients. After the turbulent months of complaints, meetings, and legal battles, Isadora thought she had seen it all, but fate still held surprises that no one could have imagined. During the investigation, the council requested a series of complementary exams to clarify technical details of the case. Among them, a DNA test was requested to confirm the identity of the operated patient. Isadora readily agreed, wishing that this was the last piece of the puzzle. Days later, when she received the report, Isadora could hardly believe what she saw. DNA analysis, genetic incompatibility with the medical record presented. In other words, the patient who had been operated on and the medical record belonged to two different people. And not only that, there were indications that the exchange could have been deliberate, not accidental. When confronting the hospital with the result, the management panicked. Internal meetings were hastily called, with the participation of lawyers, doctors, and the communication sector. They tried to minimize the fact, alleging laboratory error or technical failure. But Isadora, with the support of independent experts, knew it was the truth. This revelation completely changed the course of the investigation. It was no longer just a mistake. It was now a possible fraud with criminal implications. Isadora realized that she was facing something much bigger and more dangerous. To move forward, she teamed up with a group of forensic experts and outside investigators. Together, they began to analyze all the evidence in light of this new evidence. To move forward, she teamed up with a group of forensic experts and outside investigators. Together, they began to analyze all the evidence in light of this new evidence. The DNA tests opened doors to question other operations, other medical records, other lives. Isadora discovered that patients were used in procedures to benefit vested interests, involving insurance, health plans, and millionaire contracts. Isadora felt the weight of responsibility. Revealing this network was not just a matter of justice for her, it was the chance to transform the entire system. But she knew that the deeper she dug, the more dangers she would face. Isadora knew that touching deep wounds in the health system would not be easy. But nothing prepared her for the veiled threats that would come soon after the revelation of the DNA test. One rainy morning, when Isadora arrived home, she found an envelope without a sender in her mailbox. Inside, a handwritten letter and a clear offer. "We can solve this in a simple way. Stop now, and you will have generous financial compensation. Think about your future." The letter ended with an illegible signature and a phone number. She sat down, the envelope shaking in her hands. The suggested amount would be enough to solve his immediate problems. The medical bills, the psychological recovery, a new life away from the pain. But Isadora knew that accepting would be betraying everything she fought to show. "I can't shut up the truth," she muttered to herself. Days later, the calls began. Anonymous voices, veiled threats, attempts at intimidation. "You don't know who you're messing with. Think about your family." It was silence rewarded in the cruelest form. But Isadora was no longer alone. Anna, Lucas, and her lawyer were by her side, offering legal and emotional support. The media also embraced his cause, exposing attempts at bribery and blackmail. Instead of retreating, Isadora took a step forward. He denounced the threats to the police, asked for protection, and organized public interviews. His courage inspired other victims to speak out. But the fight took a toll. Isadora felt constant anxiety, fear invading her thoughts and her body responding with sleepless nights. Even so, his gaze remained steady. At the height of the crisis, she decided that her voice would not be silenced by money or fear. Isadora prepared herself to face whatever came her way, with truth as her weapon and justice as her shield. The battle seemed lost for Isadora. The pressure was immense, the threats constant, and the system he faced seemed almost invincible. But just as everything seemed to fall apart, an unexpected light appeared on the horizon, a witness that would change the game forever. On a gray afternoon, Isadora received an anonymous email. The message was short but direct. "I have information you need. We can talk. It's about Dr. Alvaro." The sender did not identify himself, but gave an address for a meeting in a discreet cafe, away from the watchful eyes. At the appointed location, a woman appeared. She did not want to reveal her real name, only said she was a former employee of the hospital and that she had decided to break her silence after seeing the consequences of the negligence. "I've seen things that no one should see," she began, in a low, trembling voice. "Dr. Alvaro is not what everyone thinks. He had vested interests, manipulations, even fraud to ensure favorable results in surgeries." She delivered a file on a pen drive. Inside the pen drive, Isadora found a series of videos, internal recordings, messages, and even confidential contracts. In one of the recordings, Dr. Alvaro himself talked to a businessman, discussing values to speed up processes and influence reports. It was the confirmation that corruption went far beyond what she imagined. With the evidence in hand, Isadora called a press conference. The news exploded. The case gained national repercussion, and the hospital collapsed. Authorities opened new investigations. Dr. Alvaro was removed and criminal proceedings were initiated against him and others involved. Isadora became a symbol of resistance and courage. Despite the victories, Isadora knew that the road was still long. She would continue to fight for justice, so that no one else would suffer like her, and so that the health system was, in fact, a place of healing and not of pain. The silence that had once weighed on Isadora now gave way to a new melody, that of justice and hope. After months of tireless struggle, threats, losses, and discoveries, the horizon began to brighten. With the definitive removal of Dr. Alvaro and the opening of legal proceedings against the entire corrupt network of the Santa Alianza Hospital, the truth imposed itself as a beacon in the darkness. Isadora saw her name gain national recognition, not only as a victim but as a symbol of resistance. But the process was not easy. The body scarred by the wrong surgery required constant care, and the mind bore invisible scars. She began intensive care, found support in patient groups, and dedicated herself to rebuilding her identity. an identity that, while marked by pain, was also synonymous with courage. Isadora decided to turn her story into a life project, to create an organization to support victims of medical errors, help raise awareness about rights, and fight for transparency in the health system. His voice, once muffled, was now heard by many. At a lecture event, looking at an emotional audience, Isadora said, "We don't choose the battles that life imposes on us, but we choose how to fight. I choose truth, justice, and hope." His eyes sparkled, no longer from pain but from determination. The path of justice continues, and many stories still need to be told. But Isadora knows that her struggle was not in vain. She rose from the ashes, was reborn from the flames of suffering, and showed that even in the craziest betrayal, there is strength to start over.